Our great prophet has risen in our midst, and God has visited his people. Alleluia. 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 The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Mark. Jesus and his disciples came to the other side of the sea, to the territory of the Gerasenes. When he got out of the boat, at once a man from the tombs who had an unclean spirit met him. The man had been dwelling among the tombs, and no one could restrain him any longer, even with a chain. In fact, he had frequently been bound with shackles and chains, but the chains had been pulled apart by him and the shackles smashed, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the hillsides, he was always crying out and bruising himself with stones. Catching sight of Jesus from a distance, he ran up and prostrated himself before him, crying out in a loud voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." He had been saying to him, "Unclean spirit, come out of the man." He asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "Legion is my name. There are many of us." And he pleaded earnestly with him not to drive them away from that territory. Now a large herd of swine was feeding there on the hillside, and they pleaded with him, "Send us into the swine, let us enter them." And he let them, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the swine. The herd of about 2,000 rushed down a steep bank into the sea, where they were drowned. The swineherds ran away and reported the incident in the town and throughout the countryside, and people came out to see what had happened. As they approached Jesus, they caught sight of the man who had been possessed by Legion, sitting there clothed and in his right mind, and they were seized with fear. Those who witnessed the incident explained to them what had happened to the possessed man and to the swine. Then they began to beg him to leave their district. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed pleaded to remain with him. But Jesus would not permit him, but told him instead, "Go home to your family and announce to them all that the Lord in his pity has done for you." The man went off and began to proclaim in the Decapolis what Jesus had done for him, and all were amazed. The Gospel of the Lord. There's something important, I think, that we need to look at, which we see in both of these readings this morning. Every one of these people that was spoken about in the first reading in Hebrews, and most especially the man in the gospel who's possessed, every one of those people, their freedom was compromised. In one way, shape, form, or another, by virtue of their suffering, their freedom was compromised. And yet, our freedom is the one thing that God protects more than anything else. Did you notice what the scripture said that this man did when he caught sight of Jesus? Now, this is a possessed person whose freedom is extremely compromised. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, this man is really, really suffering. bruising himself. And the scripture says that the first thing that he did when he caught sight of Jesus is that he prostrated himself. That's an act of worship. It's an act of worship. And so because even with his compromised freedom, he's able to recognize Jesus as being able to do something for him because he is the divine person of the second of the Trinity. And he prostrates himself. And because of his faith, the little bit of faith that he has left, through the freedom that is extremely compromised, Jesus sets him free. That's important for you and I to recognize. And I say it's important for you and I to recognize because there are times when our freedom is compromised. And when we approach God with that much faith, Jesus himself says, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, it can move mountains. It can move mountains. And so recognize this morning that through this much faith, the power of God raises us up, liberates us, heals us, and sets us free.